Hi, this is Elizabeth with Felted Sky, here with the instructions for our Winter Snow Needle Felting Kit in our Painting with Wool series of kits. So let's go ahead and open up the box and talk about what's inside. So first we have the instruction sheet and the Beginner's Guide to Needle Felting. So this is just some good general information to read if you are new to needle felting, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. So you might want to check that out before you get started. Then in the instruction sheet, there's just one thing that I want to mention. So I'll open it up here, and that is that this extra set of numbers next to each step, that is the time stamp for the video. So you can fast forward or rewind or skip around in the video. Just go to where you want to go using that timestamp. So that's that. And then in this kit, we have two types of wool. So this is our Felter's Fleece. It is a wool batting, and you'll want to get that ready before we get started by unrolling it. You have to find the end. Sometimes it's hiding. There's the end of this one. So just unroll and then also find the edges and unfold those. So this piece is fairly long and narrow. You might also have a piece that is a different size, perhaps more of a square, and that's fine. So this will be plenty of wool for your kit, however it is shaped. And you do want to probably keep a little piece of it with the label, or just note the color name when you take the label off. So we do refer to the color names during the video and in the instruction sheet. And if you want to reorder later, then you would have a reference to know what color you might want to get. All right, so this is our flowing wool, and it's a roving. So that is twisted more like a skein of yarn. You'll want to just untwist and unfold this like that and get that ready as well before we get started. And again, try and keep track of the color name there on the label. All right, so let me just move this out of the way. And the other things to talk about briefly are, of course, we have the hoop. So this is a nice wooden hoop made in the UK. It has some high quality hardware there, so we can use it for the framing at the end. And then there's the linen fabric. So this is going to be the backing of our picture, and you can unroll that, unfold it as well, and you may want to iron it before we get started, although I often use it without ironing it and it will still work fine. So that is about the fabric. And then we have the needle tube. So in this kit you get two blue needles, and if you refer to the back of the tube you'll see that these are the 38 star. So if you need to reorder, that would be the type to get. And there's two in the kit just in case you happen to break one. So breaking needles does happen in needle felting, especially when you're new. So that gives you one spare. Hopefully you'll be able to complete the project. And then let's talk just a little bit about how I recommend holding the needle. So I actually don't recommend holding with 2 fingers like that at the top of the needle or with 3 fingers at the top of the needle. But instead, I like to put the top of the needle kind of in the crook of my pointer finger there, a little bit back on my finger. And some people would put it on the tip like that, but I usually have mine farther back. And then the important thing is to hold farther down with your thumb and middle finger, or at least to have one finger farther down on the needle. And some people also put their ring finger down there. So that's just a more efficient and effective needle grip. It's going to give you more control of your poking, stabbing action, and hopefully help you to go straight in and out and break less needles. All right, so the other things that you will need for the project, the main one is a mat. So this is our foam mat, And if you already had a foam mat, you might not have gotten this one, but a foam will work fine for this project. It's the most economical, of course, option, but it's not as eco-friendly and it's going to wear out somewhat quickly. It depends how many projects you do on it and what type of projects, how much you're poking on it, but it's not going to last forever, so just know that when you're starting on foam. But it does work fine, and there are lots of people needle felting on the foam. So it's usually what people start out with when they're just getting started. So my favorite mat now that you might want to consider if you're going to be doing a lot of felting is a wool mat. So this is the one we make here at Felted Sky. It's just kind of a big slab of wool. There's where I've started felting on it on this side, but here's where I've been doing most of my felting. So it already has many projects on it, probably a couple months of felting often, and it's not wearing out at all. So it's still working just as well as when it was brand new. It's going to last for a very long time, and it does get filled up with little wool fibers as you see, but that does not really affect its function at all. That's just how it is when you're felting on these kind of projects. So then you will also need a couple other things. Trying to pull them out here. So the other one would be a scissors. So we need to cut the fabric off at the end of the project, the extra fabric. And you'll also need some type of glue. So I'm going to use my hot glue gun, but if you don't have one, another type of craft glue should also work for gluing your fabric to that hoop at the end. And then I just also want to mention about tools. So these are tools that I recommend for this type of project. I've tried many tools, but I like these three a lot. So this first one is a single needle tool. So you might want to consider this if you don't like holding a needle just with your fingers. So you can put the size of needle that came in the kit right into this tool, and you could use that in place of holding your needle just with your fingers. So then this is the other tool that I use the most for this type of project. This is the Clover tool with 5 needles. So this just helps some of the parts go much faster because you can be poking with 5 needles instead of 1. So this does a nice job. It does have an annoying sound with its spring action, but I put up with it because it does such a nice job, so I reach for that a lot, and you will definitely see that in the project. So you don't have to have any of these. You can still complete this project with a single needle. These just help it go a little faster. So this is the other Clover tool with 3 needles, and you may or may not see me use this in this project. I might pick it up a little bit, but generally I sculpt more with this one. But if you do have this tool already, or if you're thinking about just getting one tool, this is a nice one to have that I do use fairly often. So here's what they look like in their packaging if you want to go ahead and invest in these tools. So you could check your local store, or of course we carry them, and you can find them other places online. So now that we've talked about all of that, I think we're ready to get started. So you want to just pull out your mat and put your fabric on it and get your hoop. And then we're going to start in with the color called Blueberry. So I'm just going to lay it out at the top and then pull off the part I don't need. So if you just hold and pull, it comes off very easily there. So that's going to be the top of our sky, and then I'm getting the color called Sky, very fitting. And I'm going to put some of that in. And now the color called Blue Frost. So there is the start of our sky, and I like to check with my hoop to make sure I've got wool going off the edges, and then I'm going to pull some more pieces of Blue Frost and lay it over the sky. So we want to kind of blend the lines where these colors meet and not have those harder lines there. So this is sky, so I'm going to put a little bit of that over the blue frost. So just kind of blurring the lines where they meet a little bit. And here's some of our darker color, blueberry. So I'm getting these thinner, kind of wispy pieces. So I still see some of the other color below these. And I'll just kind of do this until I like the way my sky is looking. Maybe just a little bit more. So once you're happy with your sky, then you'll just want to take your needle and start poking. So we're poking through the wool, down through the fabric, and into the mat. So you should hear the sound of that mat, especially if you're on foam. It has a very distinctive sound, and you want to hear that sound of hitting into the mat. And then if you're on the wool mat, you won't hear as much of a sound, but it does have a little bit of a sound, and you'll definitely feel that mat underneath there. So we're just going to keep poking, and I kind of do this gradually. I just want to get all this tacked down and in place. And I'm pulling with my other hand some of the time to keep my fibers going horizontally. Just be very careful of your other hand and your fingers not to poke yourself. So I am very practiced with a lot of experience, and I've just kind of learned how not to poke myself. But some people are definitely prone to poke, so just be very careful. And we're just going to keep poking this until the wool is flattened and well attached to that fabric. So this is felting. The wool has little microscopic scales on it, and the barbs on the end of the needle are causing those to tangle together and stick together. So it's kind of like microscopic Velcro that's not going to let go. So here I'm going to switch to the tool. So for the sake of the video, we're just going to get this in a little faster, and I'll even speed up here just so we can get this finished. So you'll still be able to see what I'm doing, but we can just move things along a little bit for the sake of the video. So there is a lot of repetition, just parts where we'll be poking a lot. Don't want it to get too boring for you as we move along through the video. All right, so you can see the wool is really flattened and not as fluffy and fuzzy. So that's what we're looking for. And now I'm checking with the hoop, and I'm also taking a good look at it to see if I want to add anything. I'm also checking for areas that might have been too thin where I can see a little bit of that fabric coming through. So we just want to put on another layer, fill in any spots that seem thin, or just improve our sky. Once we've gotten it flattened the first time, you can see a little bit more of what you might want to change. So needle felting is quite forgiving. So if you have put on anything that you don't like the look of, you can pull it off. And if you want to cover it up, you just put on a bit more wool and keep poking. So these layers will just add right on, and you won't even be able to tell that we added more on. It will just look like part of the picture. So when I'm adding new things, I'm back to my single needle here. Even though I have the tool, I often just felt with a single needle because it gives me more control, and I can get things placed just where I want them. So again, if you don't have the tool, you'll just continue on. It will just take a little bit more poking with that single needle. Okay, so we'll speed up again. I'm going to hit it with the tool one more time. Okay, that looks good. So now we can be on to our next step. I'm just going to get my hoop back out. I like to always be checking what's going to show once it's framed in the hoop. So now we're going to put on our little frozen pond here near the bottom. So this is the color Spearmint. And I'm going to put in a piece like this and just make sure I have it placed so I like the placement of it when it's going to be in the hoop. So I'll get a second piece in there, overlapping. You can kind of fold under the edges a little bit and work with it till it's a nice shape. So that really helps to get it laid out before you even start poking it. Kind of get it laid out how you want it to be and then poke it down. So I usually concentrate a little more on the edges first, getting those edges in there. And once I have my edges, then I start poking more on the middle. And I'm kind of using that needle to tuck under wool, push and pull it into place on those edges. Just need to do that carefully, so you don't want to put too much pressure on the end of the needle ever, or it will snap off. So you just kind of learn how much it can take, but pushing and pulling gradually the wool into place is usually okay for the tip of that needle. And here I'm going to add a little piece of blue frost near the top, and again, kind of spread those fibers out so we still see some of the spearmint through it. But I just like to put that on the pond as well. A shadow perhaps makes it a little more interesting, or maybe it's reflecting the sky. And now getting the rest of that all poked down. Okay, so here I'm going to add a little bit more. So again, this is showing you if you want to change that line, change the edge, or fill in a bit. All you need to do is take another piece and just add it over top and poke down. So it's hard to see on the video, but in person I'm seeing, the spots that need just a little more wool put on them. So you can always go back over parts that you've already done and add on, or even take away if you need to. But I'm always seeing little things that I want to work on, even as I'm going along. Okay, so I think that will be good. And now we can get out our color called Snow. Very fitting since we're going to be putting it in as the snow here. So I'm picking out little bits of dirt that I'm seeing in it. I don't know if you can see those on the video. Probably not, but this particular wool does have some little bits in it, so if you see those, you can pick them out. And so I'm just taking a piece and arranging it. I want it to look like a hillside kind of on the right, and on the left with a little dip in the middle, perhaps a little valley there. And just with the shape that this wool is, I'm using multiple pieces and I'm having to kind of unfold it and find the pieces I need. Lay another one down here. So we don't have a lot of extra of this color since we're using so much of it. So you do want to just make sure you're getting good coverage, but you should have just enough, but not a lot of extra. So if you've run out, it probably means it's too thick somewhere. So just move things around until you've got this all covered up. So I'll do a little check here. And I do want to mention we need one piece of snow saved back for later. So just a small piece. And we're going to be using that later in the project. So now we'll go ahead and poke this down. I like to do these edges where the snow is meeting our little pond. So spend a little extra time on these, getting that nice line there where those meet. So this is going to take a bit to get all of this in. So I'm going to start with a tool. Go ahead and start poking it with this pink tool this time. Again, this has 3 needles, so not quite as many as the other tool, but does speed things up. I kind of like the texture I'm getting with this particular tool this time, so it's a good chance to see that in action. And you see I went back to my single needle to work on the line of snow right there at the top that meets the sky. Just easier to be precise with the single needle. All right, we'll check again with the hoop. And still seeing things I want to poke down more. And if we have extras down at the bottom, I can pull some of that off. And I might use this to fill in space up higher where it looks like I need a little more. Maybe one over here. And here's the piece of white snow that I saved back. So I forgot to show you that earlier, but we do need one little piece like that saved for putting the snow on our treetops later on. So now speed up one more time and just finish up the poking on this section. Okay. So next I want to get out Blue Frost again, and I'm going to put just some little wispy pieces across right here. So you saw I kind of got those on in one motion, but you can also overlap multiple little pieces and get a similar effect. So just put some of those fibers out there, again with the snow showing through. And now I'll poke these down. So this I see as kind of shadows because our trees are going to go on over top here. Or maybe the snow is reflecting a bit of that blue sky. And I'm adding just a little bit more. As I keep saying, you can always add on or take off quite easily. And I'm going to hit that with the tool a little bit. Just make sure it's nice and attached all the way. And we can smooth out with the other tool as well a bit. Okay, so now we're ready for trees. So this is the color River Rock. So I'm going to put in 6 trees and also some frozen vegetation down there around the pond. So this is all kind of open to your interpretation. If you want to put in a different number of trees or change their shape, you could certainly do that. So I'm just going to pull off little pieces like this and then fold them under, kind of tuck their edges under a bit and have an oval, something like that. So that can be my first tree. It can go outside of the hoop just a little bit, something like that. And I'll get the other tree pieces. So I want to vary their shape, so I don't want them to all be exactly the same. So like in nature, they all might be a little bit different size and shape. And if you get too much there, I just tore off a little bit. And that bit that I tore off, I could add it into the next one. All right, so one more tree. And we'll have them all. And now I'm going to get some thinner pieces and put them around the pond. And you could roll them a little bit if you want, and that's just keeping the fibers all together. And here I'm going to add a little bit more there. And again, I always have to check, make sure it's going to be in the hoop and be seen. So now we'll start poking the trees. So I'm poking their edges kind of at an angle, trying to catch kind of the underneath side of the edge and poke it down into the fabric. And then I'm going to poke a little bit on the rest of the tree once I do those edges. And we want the trees to be nicely attached to that fabric, but I'm not going to poke them quite as much as I did with the sky and the snow and the pond. So I'm going to leave them a little bit fuzzier and just a tiny bit popped up still from the rest of the picture. So a little bit of a 3D effect on these. I just want them to stand out a little bit and still retain kind of their nice texture. I'm not going to poke them quite as much as we've done for the other colors we've put on. So there you can see I'm just kind of shaping each one just a little bit. And now we can speed up and you can watch as I just get the rest of these in, and it'll be a little more of the quick version here. And I'm switching to this little frozen vegetation around our pond. And we can kind of vary it a little bit so that it has some interest, not just a straight line, but a few ups and downs there. Okay, so now we need to put in our tree trunks and branches. So this is the color Raven, the black roving. I'm going to pull out a very thin line from the end there, from the tip of it. And this is going to be my branch. So I'm going to poke in where I want the branch to start. And then I'm going to pull it down and into line for the trunk. So into that line where I want the trunk to go. Then I'm pulling off the extra piece of roving and I'm going to poke down to where I want that trunk to stop. And then I'm going to fold back up onto itself and then tear off the extra. So there's a little too much there for these small trees. So you can see now I've got a trunk and two branches all done with the same little piece of roving. So just poke on that until it seems very well attached. So there's our first tree trunk and branches in. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the other trees. So pull out a very thin line from the end. And we want them, so this is going to be my branch here. I'm going to curve it around and then down into the trunk. Then tear off that extra and go down and then fold back up on itself. And we're going to make another little branch there. So again, we want to make these different shapes each time, just so that they all look unique. And here I can add another branch by just taking my little tiny piece of roving and overlapping it with the other branch and then poking that right on there next to it. So now my cute little tree has 3 little branches. So this time I might start on the other side and then come down with my trunk. So down to where I want that trunk to sit on the snowy ground and then back up and tear off. And again, if you put in a trunk that you don't like or a branch, you can pull that whole thing off and just do it again. There's plenty of this roving. So now I think we can speed up again. So we're doing the same thing. I'm just going to try and make each one a little bit unique, but it's the very same technique. Put on another little branch on this guy as well. All right, so there are the tree trunks and branches put in. I'm liking the way that looks. So now we're going to pull out another thin line of the raven, and we're going to put just one black line right where the pond and our line of vegetation meet there. So just define that line a little bit more with a line of black. So I'm just poking, and then you can hold and pull out to keep your line thin, and then just let the end tear off. Now if you didn't get it in one piece, you can always overlap smaller pieces of roving and it will look the same. I just like to pull out as I'm going along. So there's that. Now here's where we need our little piece of snow that we had saved back. So we're going to put a little bit of snow on the tops of our trees. So we want to still see some of that gray underneath there. So I'm going to just do little wispy pieces and spread out the fibers some, so we can still see some of that gray and the black underneath. We're just making them look like they're covered in a little dusting of snow. And if your piece is too big, you just tear a little bit off. And if it's not enough, you just add on a little bit more. These are very cute snowy trees. I really like the look of them once I get that snow on there. And they're quite easy to do, as you see, so hopefully yours are looking good. Okay, so now we have snow on our trees, and now I'm going to put a little bit on the vegetation down by the lake. So whatever these little plants are down here, I'm going to put a little bit of snow on them as well. And I can't put it quite as much like right on the tops because it would blend in too much with the other snow that's on the ground. So I'm putting it down just below the tops of these so that we can still see it and it's not going to blend too much in with the hillside behind it. Just a little hint of snow on these plants. Okay, so now I'm thinking we are finished. I'm going to just check one more time with my hoop and make sure I'm liking how everything looks. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pull up now. I can always keep poking, but we'll go ahead and pull off the mat. So it does take a bit of tugging. It can get quite attached, but it will come off. So there it is. So now I'm going to look at it again. When you pull it up off the mat, usually the wool all loosens up because the mat was helping to hold all those fibers in place, the ones that were stuck into the mat. So now we need to make sure all these wool fibers are going to just be sticking to the fabric and are well enough attached and felted in that it's just going to stay like this. So we need to poke all over the whole thing again at this point usually. And then also check for any areas that seem like they need extra wool put on where you might be seeing the fabric through. So you may need to add a little bit more in certain spots. So at this point, I usually work, here's a little bit of snow that I think I need to add on to fill in. So I usually work another 15 to 30 minutes probably at this point in the project, just making sure everything is really well poked and attached to the fabric. So it definitely loosens up when you pull off the mat. So it needs a little more work at this point. So I've done the rest of that off camera just so we can move along here and show you how it goes into the hoop. So we just put that on the bottom one and figure out exactly where we want it to go and then push our hoop on. That looks pretty good, although maybe I will move it just a bit. Usually I have to do this a few times till I get it right where I want it. Checking it out. Alright, so now I'll pull the fabric tight and we want to make sure that it's nice and straight in the hoop and taut in there. And that's pretty good, I think. So I'll tighten the screw now, as tight as you can get it. I don't usually use a tool, but as tight as I can get it with my fingers seems to be good. And now we're going to flip over and cut off the excess fabric. So I'm just going to cut in about 1 inch from the hoop. So I just eyeball it and go ahead and cut that fabric off. And I like to see the back side, so I'm not going to add a fabric or a felt or anything to the back. I'm just going to glue my extra fabric to the hoop, and that's how I'm going to finish. So here's my hot glue. I just do a couple inches at a time and then quickly fold that fabric over. So there are other ways to finish that you can find on YouTube or in different blogs about hoop art and how to finish. So this is just the way that I've found that works quickly and easily for me, and I think it gives a nice enough finish to the back where I can still see that picture on the back side, which I think is always kind of cool, the way that the fibers come through there. So I leave that exposed, but you are welcome to finish with whatever your preferred method would be. All right, move my glue out of the way and unplug. So here we have it flip over for you, and there is our finished picture. So I hope that you like the way that yours turned out and that you really enjoyed doing this project. And if you are in need of other kits or other felting supplies, I hope you will visit us at feltedsky.com. And as always, happy felting!